Welcome everyone to the NJX Team Science virtual seminar series sponsored by NJX Team Science. I'm Dr. Ralph Gelati, and along with my colleagues Dr. Dan Horton and Dr. Nancy Reichman, we are co-leads of the NJX Team Science Corps and are thrilled to have you join us today. If you've attended other seminars, you know our series features biomedical research teams and leaders across the NJX Consortium, conducting high-impact multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary research, including those funded by large federal or foundation grants. We ask our guests to provide a high-level overview about their teams and their projects, and to speak to different aspects of team-based research so that we can best learn from their successes and some of their challenges. In order to introduce our distinguished guests for today, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Nancy Reichman.
Thanks, Ralph. I will introduce Dr. Emily Barrett, who's a professor at the Rutgers School of Public Health in the Department of Epidemiology. She has a bachelor's in biology and English from Amherst and a PhD in biological anthropology from Harvard, and she completed postdoctoral work at UCLA. She studies the early origins of health and disease, specifically how exposures, including chemical exposures and psychosocial stress, early in the life course, shape subsequent health and developmental trajectories. She also studies how those exposures affect reproductive hormone concentrations and pregnancy outcomes. So I will turn it over to Emily.
All right, thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Ralph, for inviting us today. So we're going to share a bit of an overview about the big project that we all collaborate on called ECHO. And I'll start us off by sharing some slides, and then we're going to split the slides across our team, and I'll just ask each team member to introduce themselves as they start speaking. So with that, let me share my screen and go into presenter mode. All right, so today we're going to be telling you about a study called ECHO, which is short for the Environmental Influences on Child Health Outcomes Study, and our site we call NJ-ECHO. So the agenda is, first we'll tell you about what is ECHO, then we will talk about the first phase of the study, which was from 2016 to 2023. Dan will take you into phase 2 of this study. We'll tell you a little bit about some of the science that's going on, as well as the operations and what we have in store for us over the next few years. So to set the stage, the science that we're going to tell you about today is really premised on the idea that our earliest environment, meaning in utero and in early childhood, can have really profound impacts on our lifelong health. And implicit in this idea is that by improving health during this very early period of life, it's the ultimate preventive care. So rather than waiting until we age and get ill, if we can intervene way upstream, we can really promote lifelong health. And that's an idea that's been gaining traction for many years. It was first called the Barker hypothesis, and now it's often known as the developmental origins of health and disease. And all over the world, including in Europe and Asia, these large national studies have been developed to follow pregnant people and their resulting children over time to better understand how early exposures affect their health. And so until recently, the US had never really managed to get a large-scale study like this off of the ground, despite several attempts. So in 2015, the NIH decided to make a big investment in this work. They awarded $144 million to teams around the country, with the goal of creating the largest study of US children's health ever undertaken, and that's ECHO. So to tell you a little bit about the first 7 years of ECHO, essentially the goal was to understand how early life factors impact child health and disease by creating a harmonized national cohort of cohorts of 50,000 mother-child dyads. So basically, rather than starting from scratch, recruiting entirely new participants, they decided to invest in studies that were already ongoing to support additional data collection. And indeed, they funded data collection in 69 existing maternal child health cohorts around the US. And so just to kind of give you a sense of what this schematic is all about, These branches in blue were the pediatric cohorts. Those are the 69 that were funded to do additional data collection. There was also an arm of ECHO here in purple called the IDEA States Pediatric Clinical Trials. And those were a sort of complementary studies in a small number of states around the country that were really intervention-based. And then the trunk of the tree is the infrastructure that was assembled to support everything. So that includes a coordinating center, a data analysis center, person-reported outcomes core, human health exposure analysis resource. So that's really the lab that did all the biomarker work, a genetics core, and a data coordinating center. So this is really quite a robust infrastructure that was developed in the first phase of ECHO. So, among the cohorts around the country, I was involved in a couple of them. I have two cohorts in upstate New York called Tides and Upside that were both part of phase one. But importantly, New Jersey was really left out of phase one. There were a handful of kids living in New Jersey who were affiliated with centers in New York, for instance, but we didn't really have a big presence in New Jersey in this first phase of ECHO. And as far as the science in ECHO, it really focuses on 5 major child health outcomes. So pre, peri, and postnatal outcomes. So that's things like preterm birth and pregnancy complications, upper and lower airways. So things like asthma, obesity and growth, neurodevelopment, and positive health. So the things that make children thrive and succeed. And there have been lots of publications coming out of this first 7 years of ECHO. So on the ECHO website, which we'll link to later, there are summaries in lay language of all of the research that's been published. And so, just to give a few examples, there have been links between neighborhood conditions in childhood and asthma. There's been work on the care of infants with neonatal opioid withdrawal syndrome, changes in BMI in kids before and after policy changes around healthy lunches, and work on, of course, on the COVID pandemic. So lots of different topics. These are just a handful. And in fact, there have been over 1,200 papers published during the first phase of ECHO. So that's a pretty impressive metric. And it just shows that there's like a huge team of investigators all over the country working with this really rich data set. To give you a few examples of some studies that were published recently that I've been involved in, there was work on birth outcomes in relation to food insecurity during pregnancy that was recently published, work on pregnancy complications and epigenetic aging in newborn, and work on maternal trauma during childhood and how that may affect child health outcomes. And a lot of these have been, pretty highly cited and quite impactful. At the same time, there have also been a lot of challenges that were encountered during the first phase of ECHO. So it was, despite that strong infrastructure, quite decentralized. So the sites had a fair bit of latitude in the study activities and data collection that they did. ECHO 1 had to retroactively harmonize data that had been coming from these cohorts for, in some cases, up more than a decade. And that proved to be quite challenging and time-consuming. There's patchiness and missingness of important data points because of that, because some cohorts had collected certain things that others hadn't. And a lot of the processes and systems were kind of slow to launch. If you imagine this is like a huge airplane that they're trying to get off the ground with lots of moving parts, it really moved quite slowly at first. So there were quite a few barriers to success. Nevertheless, with all of the publications that came out, Congress appropriated funds for another 7 years of follow-up, and an RFA was released in 2022 with the vision for what the next 7 years of ECHO would look like. And I believe, Dan, are you taking over?
Yep.
Okay.
Happy to. So, hi all, Dan Horton. I am not only a co-leader of the Team Science Core, but I'm a proud member and a co-principal investigator of the ECHO project. And I am happy to talk to you more about this current phase of the project. So in ECHO phase 2, which started in fall of 2023. The goal was to build on the successes of phase 2, but also kind of expand and address some of the challenges that were faced in these next 7 years of the project. So overall, there were a total of 50 projects that were funded in this phase 2 of the study. And this was a mixture of cohorts that were involved in phase 1 and will continue to follow participants and collect data, as well as a number of new pregnancy cohorts that will newly enroll pregnant people and then follow their children over time. And the goal is to get a total of 60,000 pregnant people and children across both phases of ECHO that are followed and contribute to this large national cohort. So there are two main parts of phase 2. One is about collecting data, and the other is about using those data. So first, in terms of the data collection, we heard about some of the challenges in phase 2 with decentralization and lack of harmonization. So really, to address this, phase 2 is about one ECHO, one large national cohort implementing a unified protocol across all sites with prescribed visits and data and specimens to be collected irrespective of site. And so the goal is to really, harmonize the data collection, try to minimize or get rid of missing data, and really to leverage the power of this national cohort, but really allow science to kind of take advantage and use information from all the participants, and not just those sites which happen to have data in phase 1 that were useful for any given project. And so we'll hear more in a little bit about some of the details about the visits and the types of data being collected. And phase 2, or sorry.
Sorry.
No, and the second component of this is really to use the data to conduct impactful science across the cohort. So this is individual sites and investigators collaborating with various other investigators in the consortium will conduct studies in various areas of expertise, and the areas of interest, the outcomes that Emily mentioned before, are the same, even though there are some evolving priorities at the project level. Really, the focus is on these 5 different major outcome areas. Next slide, please. So we at Rutgers and New Brunswick were fortunate, and St. Peter's, we're very fortunate to be one of those newly funded pregnancy cohort sites through ECHO. And this announcement was for 2 years of funding to kind of kick off the project and really get going with all the recruitment and project proposals, with the hopes that we'll continue for the 7 years of phase 2 as New Jersey ECHO site. Next slide, please. So it is a real privilege to work with such an amazing team on this New Jersey ECHO project. There are 6 principal investigators total. Emily is the contact principal investigator. And we also have, aside from myself, Marty Blazer and Maria Gloria Dominguez-Bayo, Manny Jimenez, and Kristy Palomares, who we'll hear from shortly. We also have incredible co-investigators, including Ray Panettiere and Todd Rosen, who you'll see shortly, Evan Jansen, Zorimar Rivera Nunez, and And then supported, and I'll just say that this team of investigators has expertise spanning lots of different disciplines. So from cohort design and development, environmental epidemiology, clinical epidemiology, obstetrics, pediatrics, microbiome research, community engaged research, bioinformatics, and airway health. I can go on, but it really is, even within this one team of a very diverse group of sites and investigators, covers a lot of different disciplines. And in addition to the investigators, we are, the project is supported by an incredible team of staff led by Michelle Jansen, who you'll meet shortly, who is has expertise in a variety of areas as well, supporting the project, including things from recruitment and enrollment to data collection and data analysis, regulatory documentation, biospecimen management, all to make sure that this project is successful, things run smoothly, and really Michelle is really the person who keeps everything and everyone organized and running as it should. And we're so grateful for everything she does for this study. Next slide. So this is a graphical display of the aims that we proposed for New Jersey Echo. And again, with the idea that most of this is taking advantage of data collected from across the Echo project, not just our particular site. And given the interests and expertise of the team, a focus of our aims was on the microbiome. So the bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other microbes that inhabit our bodies and play important roles in the development and maintenance of various aspects of health, including things like growth and metabolism and neurodevelopment and immunity, touching on the different kinds of priorities and outcomes of interest for ECHO. And actually, we in this project, or in these aims, focused on the outcome of airway health and specifically asthma and seasonal allergies. So for aim 1, and also just for context, the microbiome develops and goes through particularly dramatic changes during pregnancy and in the earliest months and years of childhood. And it's thought that these are critical stages, both in kind of the development of the microbiome, and we hypothesize that microbiome influences on subsequent health. And also, another interest and focus of the project is on disparities in outcome across different racial and ethnic and socioeconomic groups, and how changes in the microbiome might relate to those disparities in outcomes. So for aim 1, we're focused on a variety of different factors and exposures that influence the microbiome, that might, in some circumstances, change or disrupt the microbiome in ways that affect health later on. And the factors of interest include medications that affect the microbiome, like antibiotics, mode of birth delivery, cesarean section versus vaginal delivery, feeding practices, formula versus breast milk, and all trying to understand how differences across racial and ethnic and socioeconomic groups might relate to differences in the way the microbiome matures in these different groups. Then in aim 2, we're really focused on and looking at outcomes and how the differences in exposure to these microbiome perturbing factors relate to these outcomes, and whether changes in the microbiome seem to help explain the connection between these factors and the disparities in outcomes. Aim 3, we're focused on recruitment of participants in New Brunswick, and I'll leave that for Kristy to tell us more about, and Todd. And then in aim 4, it is a focus on the preconception period. So after parents give birth to their children, they remain enrolled in the study, and the hope is that we can study the period even before conception of another child, and try to understand the importance of that preconception period on subsequent health of future children. And our focus in this aim is really on microbiome disrupting medications as it relates to subsequent health of future offspring, future children. So next slide, please. So being members as part of this One ECHO, this national ECHO team, our responsibility, one of our responsibilities is to propose and lead the analyses of scientific projects, using data from across ECHO, but also collaborating with investigators at other sites who are interested in our project. And then, one, as you heard from Emily, we're supported by this really excellent infrastructure, including a data analysis center run through Johns Hopkins that based on the needs of the study, is able to conduct the analyses and support the team based on the analyses proposed. And then the commitment is to once these data are analyzed, to write them up, to publish and disseminate these results, again with the help of ECHO and its communications teams, and hopefully build on the successes of that phase 1 with hopefully even more output across the ECHO project in phase 2, taking advantage of these more harmonized protocol, this uniform protocol. So just to give you one example of the analyses that we're proposing and leading here at NJ ECHO. This one was led by Gloria Dominguez-Bayo, looking at the relationship between family structure, like birth order and family size, and the development of the microbiome in babies. And so the hypothesis is that the larger families and the later the children are born, with older siblings, that there's more opportunities for transfer and exposure to diverse microbes, that the microbiome will be more diverse, and that this will confer protection against subsequent diseases like asthma, like obesity, and others. And the map, just to point out, shows the sites involved in ECHO phase 1. Again, there's even more sites involved at this point, or new sites as well, adding a mark in New Jersey, but also to point out that the data and the cohort involves children, we're told, are participants from all 50 states, as well as DC and Puerto Rico. So really a diverse and large group of contributing sites and participants. Next slide, thank you. So in addition to leading science, we're also asked to do other functions, again, as part of this large collaborative study, and really a great example of team science. So we're asked to collaborate on proposals from that are proposed and led by other sites. And every week, we are given names and descriptions of new projects that other teams, other investigators are proposing, and any investigator can join any project. It's really very collaborative in that way. And every project is required to have investigators from at least 2 different sites. So this is just one example a proposal that I and several of us on the team joined. This was led by a PI at Mass General Hospital, looking at the relationship between genetics and the early life microbiome and the development of childhood obesity. So again, with kind of overlaps with our own interests here at New Jersey Echo. And then if you go to the next, so in addition to participating in proposals as collaborators, we're also expected and doing our part to be involved in other aspects of ECHO, so including serving on committees. We have members of our team who are on the publications committee, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility committee, and others. So we're also meeting regularly with teams at other sites, sometimes to kind of learn from other sites that are doing great things in terms of enrollment and retention, and trying to learn from them. We also have these monthly pod meetings where investigators from various sites get together, talk about issues, talk about challenges, and also provide information that's then fed to the central committees, again facilitating communication and trying to make this as smooth and successful a project. And finally, there's national meetings involving investigators and staff and trainees from across ECHO and from the central cores and committees. There's 2 meetings a year. We just came back from one of them, and that's another way to really kind of learn and grow and be together as we continue to participate in ECHO. So anyway, I will turn it over to Kristy for the next part.
Hi, thank you. I'm Kristy Palomares. I'm one of the site principal investigators at St. Peter's University Hospital, and I'm one of the physician scientists with expertise in high-risk obstetrics. So we are recruiting 500 pregnant people in the first half of pregnancy and following them and their children until 2030. Recruitment sites are at Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital and St. Peter's University Hospital in the New Brunswick area. And we're recruiting from our OB clinics, both our low risk and our high risk clinics. In terms of the visit schedule for our patients, we are recruiting early in pregnancy, and then we follow up with them at their follow-up visits throughout the pregnancy. And then there are child visits at 0 to 5 months, 6 to 11 months, and then annually after that. Visits typically are going to include online surveys, collecting biospecimens from mom and children, some direct measures like height, weight, airway testing. And for these visits and completing the different things we're asking patients to do, we are providing incentives back to our patients. Next slide. Thank you. In terms of how we're recruiting our patients, in terms of the number of patients, we're looking to recruit 175 pregnant people from Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital and 325 pregnant people from St. Peter's University Hospital. And then after we've recruited them and we've done the initial surveys and the initial visits, those patients are going to follow up at Rutgers for all their infant and child follow-up at the Rutgers Clinical Research Center. And I'll pass it off to Todd Rosen now.
Hey, I'm Todd Rosen. Kristy Palomares and I do the same thing. We're both maternal fetal medicine specialists, and thank you for having us today. We started this study recently. We started recruiting for the study in January, so just a few months ago, and we are super thrilled that we've been able to recruit between our 2 sites 60 pregnant people. We have most of this work falls to our research coordinators, and we have our 2 research coordinators at Rutgers are both bilingual, and we've been very effective in recruiting patients who are only Spanish speakers. You can see that we've included a diverse group of subjects, and that was one of the goals, and New Brunswick is a really diverse community, and I think that makes us a really good site to work in within ECHO. Next slide, please. Right, so we are well ahead of target with our recruitment, and this is a competitive study, and meeting our goals is super important. The fact that we had a pretty aggressive recruitment target based on the other randomized, other prospective clinical trials that both St. Peter's and Rutgers have been engaged in. But you can see we are now at 60 subjects. This slide's a little bit old, but you can see that we were well above it, ahead of target, and that really speaks to the dedication and the hard work from the crews both at St. Peter's and at Rutgers. Next slide. And I don't know who's after me. I apologize for not knowing that.
Michelle, I think you're up.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily and Todd. It's a pleasure to be on the call with everyone today. My name is Michelle Jansen, and I currently serve as the program manager for our New Jersey Echo sites here in New Brunswick. So in terms of what's coming up next, we're continuing to enroll at both sites to reach our recruitment targets. And we actually had our first Echo baby yesterday. So we're really excited that we'll be starting the infant and child follow-up visits now through the Clinical Research Center. And we're also adding in biospecimen collection. So when we first started this study in mid-January of this year, we were just primarily doing the online survey collection, so a lot of data collection. But starting this month, in April, May, we are doing maternal urine and blood for trimester 2 as well as trimester 3 in pregnancy. And then our first postnatal visits are scheduled to occur between birth and 5 months of age. So we're trying to do this a little bit differently at each site based upon capacity. So some of these visits will occur in the hospital prior to the infants and their moms being discharged. And then others will actually occur at that 0 through 5 month time point at the Robert Wood Johnson Pediatric Clinical Research Center. And next slide, please. So some of the strengths and challenges of the ECHO project are, in terms of strengths, we have this amazing large sample size. And, here in New Jersey, we are really capitalizing upon our very unique demographic diversity. So we have diversity in terms of socio-demographic, geographic. So we're really excited about that. On a national level, we also have very extensive investigator and staff expertise. So we really get to, harness that power. And our staff is incredible because across the nation, they're really the ones that are taking the protocol, translating it into operations on the ground, and really making everything happen in a very nimble way, because sometimes the protocol changes throughout the study, and we really have to pivot and implement those changes very, very quickly. One of the things that I personally love about ECHO is the research is really based upon this very solutions-oriented mindset. All the investigation is really geared to primary prevention and figuring out why certain things happen at different developmental time points and windows. And ECHO provides us with an amazing, extensive, very responsive, supportive infrastructure. And then some of the challenges include sometimes the breadth of assessments preclude the depth. We do have, as Dan mentioned, this one ECHO. So all of the sites nationally are implementing the standard protocol. So unfortunately, it doesn't leave a lot of room for individual site investigation. So for example, in New Jersey, we have very specific problems with child health. We have very high rates of asthma. We are also the 3rd highest in the nation for rates of autism, but unfortunately, we can't really customize the protocol to meet our needs with child health. We also had just some weaknesses in terms of the data that were collected in cycle 1 of ECHO. We had data missingness, and since the protocol wasn't standardized, every site was doing, something a little bit different with the research. So it's really hard to just harmonize all of that. And then ECHO, because this is such a large project, there is a very high administrative burden that we have to carry, and just really make sure that we're doing everything that we need to do and going above and beyond as, everywhere that we can. And then if you want to learn a bit more about ECHO, ECHO has a wonderful website. So we encourage everyone to definitely jump onto their website, learn more about ECHO. That website is echochildren.org. And one of the things that I especially love about the website is on the bottom, you'll find the subscribe button where you can provide your email address to be, subscribed to receive the ECHO monthly newsletter. So definitely check out ECHO and learn more about it. And thank you so much for your time.
And that's all from our team, so I will stop sharing.
I have a question. Well, I have a million questions, but I'm not going to take up all your time. That was fantastic. What an interesting project. It sounds to me like there's going to be there have been, or there's going to be a lot of multi-authored papers coming out of this. And I was wondering if you have rules about that. I can't imagine, having dozens and dozens and dozens of investigators on every paper, but it sounds like you're allowing for that. And has there been any trouble with free riders? Like people sign me up for that paper, sign me up for that paper, and they want to be on every paper, but they don't do anything.
Well, I can speak to this a little bit since I've experienced quite a bit of it from the first phase of ECHO. I mean, there really is a limitless opportunity to engage in team science across the sites, I would say, and it's really up to each investigator kind of what their appetite is for it. I would say, given how many proposals come through for projects that folks would like to do, and I showed you, that there have been something like 1,200, 1,400 papers published so far, nobody signs up for everything. I think like even if, someone had the appetite to engage in everything, they just don't have the time. So ECHO does have some rules around like what level of engagement you have to have in order to really sign on as a co-author, and it is in line with kind of the standard expectations around publication that many of the journals hold. So, it includes things like participating in meetings to think about the analytic strategy. It includes, reviewing the manuscript, and in some cases, the co-authors are asked to write pieces of the manuscript. So I think in general, it usually ends up that the writing teams, consist of anywhere from maybe 10 to 25 authors across all of the sites. I'm sure there is a little bit of a free rider phenomenon, but it hasn't been a major problem to my knowledge so far.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. What an organized, fascinating presentation, and congratulations on so much success. And can't wait to read more and learn more about the papers that come out of this work and all the continued good work you all are doing. So thank you so much. I have a question about culture. One of the things that stands out as I was listening to your presentation is your sense of enthusiasm for the work. It's multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and you're coming at it from different vantage points, but I could sort of hear so much your passion for the participants of this research, for those who will be beneficiaries of the research, and for the subject of the scholarship. And I'm wondering how your enthusiasm sort of plays out in shaping the culture of a high-performing team. Any reflections on sort of what the culture for NIH ECHO in New Jersey looks like?
Emily, if you don't mind, can I just enter from my angle? So so Dr. Palomares and I are largely responsible for recruiting subjects into study, and without that function, like all the high-level science that follows can't be done. Both of us, and I'll speak for Dr. Palomares because we're part of other research consortiums concurrently, we have a lot of competition for recruiting subjects for a wide variety of studies, both industry and government funded. But I will tell you that Dr. Barrett, especially, and Michelle have been so inclusive in their approach. They have explained things so well. They've relayed the importance of the study to us that we've made recruiting for ECHO a priority. We're not neglecting any of our other studies, but we feel like we're part of doing something super meaningful that may have a long-lasting impact on the health of children and maybe moms too in the long run. And we are just thrilled to be participating, and our research staff, has followed suit. They're part of all the meetings. They're excited, and it really leads to like at least a good start on our end, trying to meet our commitments to ECHO so we can be part of everything that goes on in the study.
I think oh, go ahead, Kristy.
I'll just second that. I would say Emily and Michelle's enthusiasm and just the way they talk about the study and they are so passionate about it, I think just trickles down to the rest of the team. And so I think that's one of the more important parts of having a multidisciplinary team, is that the people in charge, are really passionate and energetic about what you're doing, and just putting that out there every time we have a meeting. I have a lot of research calls every week, and I actually enjoy the echo call quite a bit because I like to hear everybody's just chatting and very excited about their science they're doing. And so I think it starts from the top and comes down to the rest of the team.
I think one other thing I would just add is that, it's such a big project and there's so much data being collected that there really is room for every investigator who works on the project to carve out a space for their own science. So, our NJ Echo site is really focused on the microbiome, but historically, I haven't been someone who studies the microbiome. I study mostly chemical exposures. And so I'm pursuing some questions on chemical exposures, and it really is, within our purview to propose any science that we want to do. Dan had a great idea about a team science analysis that we could do within ECHO. So it's really kind of limitless. And I think, there's not a lot of hierarchy as far as like only the, lead people can propose things. Like if you want to propose an idea, you can take it and run with it.
Well, you can see our smiles when you mentioned the team science project. Our wheels are turning over here. So thank you, Emily. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks, Todd and Kristy.
So it seems like it's the project's very centralized. How much input does your team have on like the survey instruments? It sounds like everybody in every site uses the same survey instruments, and you don't add any of your own questions. Is that correct?
Michelle, do you want to take that one?
Oh, sure. I'm happy to take that. Thanks so much, Emily. Yeah, we have complete standardization across the national cohort. So all of the surveys are administered through REDCap Central. They're all evidence-based and they've been used in prior ECHO cohorts. So yeah, unfortunately, there isn't any wiggle room in terms of adding some site-specific survey questions or modifying surveys to better meet our site's needs or, topics for investigation. So we're a little bit limited with that.
Yeah, the one exception to that is that each site was asked to kind of express an area of special interest. And so we chose asthma and airway health. And what that means is that as our kids get older, we're going to be implementing some kind of supplemental assessments around airway health that not every site nationally will do, but only the ones that said they were interested in asthma and airway. So that's a little bit, one way that we can do a little bit of a deeper dive on some of kind of our science with some extra data collection at our site. But again, it will be a standardized protocol that kind of comes down from the central coordinating center.
And I'll just add that, in the first national meeting of this new phase of ECHO, when the teams got together and the investigators, talked, there was some kind of invitation to discuss or propose, additional samples to collect or additional time points to collect of the samples they're planning. It's unclear what's going to be practical, what's going to be implemented, but they are making kind of some interval changes in the protocol, some by design that they just didn't start up front, but there is some willingness to consider the expansion or consider the input from the sites. But the reality is that if everyone got their wishes about what data and what samples they want to collect, like there'd be too much for participants who already are faced with a lot to do at each study visit. So I think they're really trying to balance kind of all the different scientific interests and priorities with the feasibility of study.
In a way, this feels like sort of the ultimate like meta team study. We have like 2 clinical teams that recruit, then we have our New Jersey team, and then we have this like larger team of teams around the country, and kind of navigating everyone's. We have both shared interests, in advancing and promoting children's health, but we also each have our own kind of unique priorities. And so balancing so everyone feels like they get something out of it and, wants to kind of commit their time and their passion to this, I think is a like delicate juggling act that so far has gone pretty well.
Would there be opportunities if somebody could get funding at like your site to do like an add-on study with your patients?
Yeah, so ECHO does have protocols for proposing ancillary projects. So they're not active quite yet, so we couldn't submit something today, but I think within the next 6 months, like if someone wanted to submit an R21 or a K award or an F31 to do some kind of add-on, they're very much interested in promoting kind of new ideas.
Okay, I'll shut up now. I have a long list of questions, but go ahead, everybody.
Oh, also just to say that they do have kind of a series of supplemental grants funded through, I think it's called the Opportunities and Infrastructure Fund, or OIF, that they have several cycles. I think, once a year they fund a series of projects kind of from, investigators at participating sites of related topics, and theoretically things that kind of, harness or leverage the existing infrastructure, the existing data, or otherwise, are consistent with the priorities of ECHO. So, and we have an application submitted from our site that's under review now for that first OIF cycle of this phase.
And those are, I don't think you said, Dan, those are really geared at early career investigators to help them launch their careers towards an R01. So it's like a stepping stone that could get them involved in this big consortium and kind of build their careers.
That was my next question about training opportunities.
Yeah, so that's absolutely the biggest one. But I think, increasingly, like as we start to generate data, we're going to be having doctoral students working with us. We have a couple right now, but we're going to be adding more. And, much like our team, they span many different disciplines as well. So like right now we have, one who works on the microbiome. We have a toxicologist. We're going to have an epidemiologist join us. So, we're definitely going to be adding trainees of diverse backgrounds and perspectives to the team.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and at this recent national ECHO meeting, we met with lots of different folks at various sites, including graduate students and postdoctoral fellows who were actively engaging in science at their respective sites, and coming to these national meetings to learn and share. So it's really, I think it does seem part of the culture and part of the design.
All right. Ralph, do you have any other questions?
I don't think so. I do, but this was really fascinating.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I have any others. This is just a minor question, but I remember the National Children's Study, which is now defunct. Did any of this come out of that, or was it just started from scratch?
I think it did conceptually, because a lot of the investigators who work on ECHO were involved in the National Children's Study. So I was actually a postdoc working on the National Children's Study. So that's kind of like how I got my feet wet in this area. And I think there were a lot of lessons to be learned from that study about things that didn't work. And so for those who kind of are not as familiar with that study. So that was kind of envisioned to be the same idea, a large national cohort, but that one was really starting from scratch. So, you know, having sites recruiting pregnant people de novo, you know, building their own infrastructure from scratch. And in many cases, preconception, they were recruiting, not just during pregnancy. Whereas here, I think ECHO saw that that was kind of a problematic approach and there were a lot of challenges with recruitment. And so they said, why don't we invest in cohorts that already have a proven track record of success? They're embedded in the communities and the clinics that they're going to recruit from. And so it's sort of an easy next step to kind of give them some additional money to implement ECHO protocols. And so I think it actually, you know, it's proven to be in the US a much more successful strategy. I mean, I think some other countries have had success with the model of recruiting from scratch, building everything from the ground up. In the US, I think they're just, you know, people interact with research and the medical system differently. And so this seems to have proven to be a much more fruitful approach to doing a large pregnancy cohort here.
Got it.
Excellent. Well, I'll offer some concluding remarks here, but first want to just acknowledge our sincere gratitude for each of you and all of your colleagues with the ECHO project for your great work and for being part of this series today. I think anyone who's listening in learned a lot and is probably really inspired to want to connect further with you on the work you all are doing. So thank you for taking the time to join us and offer these thoughts. We also encourage listeners to share this recording with colleagues who might have an interest in the ECHO project or an interest in team science. We also have a whole host of other videos that are part of this series that we hope you'll tune into. And if our Team Science Corps can offer any support in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. We're always happy to help. All the best, and thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
For having
Thank
us.
you for having us.